like that at the end of the trivia. And I just wanted to share some trauma statistics for riders. So I guess we've got the context of, the size of the issue or the magnitude of what we're seeing. And the first graph that we're looking at here is basically the past 20 years, the measure of riders that have been lost their life on our road network. And although there's some peaks and troughs, this dotted line represents that kind of, what's the word? It's like the gradient, I guess, or where things are heading towards. And you can see it's relatively flat. So we're not seeing a trend line. Thank you very much, David. That's exactly what I was after. Prize to David. The trend line is relatively flat. It's indicating that we're not really heading in the direction that we would like, which is obviously aiming towards zero, trying to ensure that we're reducing those figures. And it's more or less hovering around the 40 cyclists per year are killed on our transport network across Australia. If we actually, do a bit more analysis and compare that to what are the cycling volumes per capita, so relative to the population at that specific period, we do see that the trend line is showing a little bit more of a downward trend. However, we're not achieving the same benefit as we're seeing with vehicle fatalities. So another way that you could interpret this is the changes that we've made on the transport network appear to be doing some good things for reducing fatalities for those in vehicles. And to a lesser extent, we're helping our cycling community. So we're not at the same kind of level of reduction for both of those modes. And so there is more space to be done within the cycling area. Unsurprisingly, we do have males being the predominant people, gender being killed if they are riding. I say unsurprisingly is because it's quite common to be men involved in high risk scenarios, riding on road in high speed areas, and also men are a bit more prone to undertake risky maneuvers and things like that. So we're seeing that at about 83% of those fatalities are men. I wanted to quickly share an example that was sent through from our participants in last Wednesday's chat. So thank you, Ed, for sharing this example. It is very, very cool, interesting type of treatment going on. And I think Ed brought up quite an interesting point with regards to left-turning cycling traffic at this intersection. And the way that we've interpreted it, feel free to say if we're incorrect, Ed, but riders in the bicycle lane on road in this area and then turning left, they have to cross over the intersection. And so if you're a vehicle and also turning left, it's just a little bit unexpected, particularly if this rider was indicating that they're going left before the intersection. That driver may assume that they're actually turning left onto the carriageway and not into the bicycle facility there. Pretty interesting example, I've got to say. I don't think I've seen a layout exactly like this, so it's very, very unique. But some good things, some pros about this that I like to see is the inclusion of this speed cushion. And so what that will do is hopefully reduce the speeds of vehicles as they're approaching that conflict point. Admittedly, it does look as if there's quite a bit of space between there. So not too sure if you've got vehicles kind of going around the speed cushion like that, just to avoid that and entering the bicycle lane. So that's another consideration, just as a quick glance at this site, that things may be occurring. But yeah, it is an interesting site. So thanks for sharing. Loretta.
Just a couple of things that have come through, but First quick one, what's the location? Oh, I think Ainsley's just answered that in the chat. Thanks, Ainsley.
Thank you, Ainsley. Yep.
But there is another comment here, but have push bike safety advancements been as prominent as vehicle safety advancements in that time?
Great question. And I would say absolutely not. I think more or less the safety features are pretty similar to a few decades ago. Maybe we've got lights on our bikes that flash a little bit brighter, or things like that, but relatively negligible impact on those trauma statistics. Whereas if you compared that to the motor vehicle industry, where we've got, you know, the automatic braking occurring, we can get cars that can predict when a collision is going to occur and just slam on the emergency brakes, or all the other features in the vehicles, you know, if they're straying off the traffic lane, they're automatically taking over and things like that. So I would say that this cycle is well and truly a much more humble mode of transport that has not had that same technical advancements. But really good question. Okay, we'll get stuck into some content now. And today's focus is all going to be on roundabouts. So we could have included the roundabouts discussion as part of our previous module, because that was intersections, and a roundabout is an intersection form. But we've deliberately decided to make this its own separate module because there are very specific concerns and risks associated with roundabouts that are really worth exploring, and we want to make sure everyone is comfortable and acknowledge what those risks are. So we're going through all different types of roundabouts today. There's no Wally for today, so don't need to be stressed about looking out for Wally. He's not going to pop up in today's slides, but we will have an assignment. So I'll go through that coursework at the end of the module, but you don't need to worry about our friend Wally for today. We provided two different examples here of intersections and riding through intersections and performing right turn movements. So in example one, you would have had an experience of riding through the protected intersection, and example two, just a more conventional intersection, although it does feature those hook turn boxes. So hopefully you managed to have a look at both of those examples, and we'd love to hear your feedback in the chat. And if you did feel that safety benefit associated with the protected intersection, we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Okay, so we are going to have a very similar agenda as what we did with the intersections, where we're going to talk about this idea of a protected roundabout. So previously it was protected intersections, now it's protected roundabouts. And we'll talk about exactly what are the design features associated with the protected roundabout. We'll look at some international examples, and then focus on something a bit closer to home and have a look at Melbourne's protected roundabout. Then we will have a chat through, well, what about multi-lane roundabouts? Because protected roundabouts are generally installed single lane approaches, single lane in the circulatory area. So how do we manage cycling connectivity and safety within multi-lane roundabouts? And finally, we'll have a chat about local roundabouts as well. Now, although this document is a little bit old now, 2016, Vic Roads, or Department of Transport and Planning, have produced quite a good tool within this space, which is the guidance on bicycle and pedestrian treatments at roundabouts. Other jurisdictions have similar papers, but we will be referring to that as part of today's discussion. And similarly, Austroads have also produced their own research report, which is bicycle safety at roundabouts. I think I mentioned this with the wayfinding aspect as well. Like when Austroads, they hone in on one topic, like bicycle safety at roundabouts, I think that really speaks volumes about the issue that is there. They wouldn't invest this time and money and resources in developing this research report if they didn't believe there was a gap within industry about understanding the risks of cycling safety at roundabouts. So I think that really does shed light on the prevalence of this as an issue, that there is this standalone report. So protected roundabouts looks something like this. This is an artistic rendition of Melbourne's protected roundabout. And we'll go into all the features in a few moments' time, but what I'd first like you to just comprehend at this stage is we're not forcing riders into the circulating area. So the circulating area is just where vehicles travel. That's that part of the carriageway, the round part. We're not bringing riders into that space because we'll go into that detail in a second, but it's very, very hard to be able to manage that interaction safely unless it's very, very low speeds. So this is an example of Melbourne's protected roundabouts, and riders are instead offered the opportunity to basically have an off-road facility that passes, adjacent that circulating area. So they don't need to worry about going into that area at all, and they've got their own separate facility. What's also really exciting about Melbourne's edition is all of the conflict point areas on each leg is raised up. And I've already spoken to why we like those raised features so much, because they really highlight that this is a priority crossing for pedestrians and for riders. But it also physically slows down vehicles. So you're not just going to get, motorists failing to see that there's a give way sign. The presence of that vertical deflection is going to slow down vehicles. So they're very, very effective of reducing operating speed. So it's a big tick for having that as raised. Okay. Protected roundabouts. I might actually get Loretta to launch a poll at this stage.
Yeah, just while I'm doing that, sorry, can I just interrupt before we go into this one? I think it was going back to a couple of slides where there was an example of two. The question was, what did you make of the Subaru mounting the curb? How could that be avoided?
Oh, yes. Okay, so that was, thank you very much, Loretta. Thank you for sharing as well in the chat. We'll give a prize out there. Well spotted. There was a vehicle that was mounting the curb as we were conducting that little video for the module 3. And so if you haven't seen it, make sure you're not watching the presenter. Just turn the camera around and have a look at how traffic is interacting. It's not an uncommon thing to occur, and in a perfect world, you would have those incidents really, really minimized. I can say that this feature, it's been struck multiple times, both by turning vehicles and also by riders. There was an incident where a rider just thought this was a conventional intersection, just wanted to go straight through, but did collide with that did collide with the corner refuge island and broke their arm and things like that. And the immediate response to mitigate that as a risk was to install the RRPMs, raised reflective pavement markers, or the cat's eyes. They were just glued on there, like half a dozen of them or so, just to help raise that awareness, because it kind of does blend in with the surrounding area. But it's just one of those things where, I guess in a perfect world, you'd make it as contrasting as possible to really delineate that this is a raised feature and not to collide with that. The other option would be, and it's probably not always feasible, but whether a barrier curb could be installed on the driving side to once again mitigate that risk of entry onto the corner refuge island. But it may not be achievable, given that sometimes it needs to be mounted if you've got heavy vehicles and things like that. So it's a good pickup, and I wish I had a better explanation or a better solution within that space, but it's more or less, part of how these things operate. So yeah, just the takeaway there is try to make it as obvious as possible, and also make sure your lighting is suitable. So in low light conditions, it's clearly visible for everyone. But Loretta, if you don't mind launching the poll. So in this little diagram, we've got 3 cyclists within the roundabout. We've got cyclist A there, cyclist B just adjacent the splitter island, and cyclist C within the roundabout. And the question is, which cyclist do you believe is most at risk? And we'll give you 30 seconds to fill that one out. And final reminder that these polls are not marked or recorded, so they're anonymous. So don't get too stressed if you're not 100% sure. Just pop in an answer that you think is the correct one. All right, we'll give you 5 more seconds. So fill in your answer. 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll there, and we can share the results. And okay, we can see that there's a bit of differing opinion there, and not as clear cut as the other polls that we've had, where it's usually been pretty one-sided. But that's actually good. I like to see that diversity, because there is really no correct answer. I would say all of those riders are at risk. And I'll just go through a bit of that explanation as to why you could be correctly putting any of those answers. And there's a valid explanation for each of them. So rider A, although they have passed the conflict point for exiting traffic, they could still be picked up by vehicles that are entering the roundabout. And as we know, vehicles such as this yellow one, they are focused on everything to the right of them. So all they're looking at is there a gap in traffic? Am I good to go? And they're not necessarily paying any attention to what's directly in front of them within their windscreen view, which could be a rider, where we've got bicyclist A there. Another reason a collision could occur in this instance is if that yellow vehicle notices the adjacent vehicle entering the roundabout, they may not even bother to do a check. They may just be like, that vehicle's going, I'm going, and that's where you get a collision. So completely agree that there's significant risks associated with that. Rider B, adjacent that splitter island there, I would say is in quite a precarious situation, because once again, this purple vehicle is focused on other vehicles within the circulating area. So we are completely trained when we're doing any giveaway processes to slow down and observe vehicles, big vehicles. Like, that is just what we're trained to do. That is the behavior behind it. It actually it requires more cognitive effort to be able to see bike riders and also motorcyclists, because they're smaller and we're just not expecting, or we're not used to having to look out for them as well. So it's this phenomenon called, looking but not seeing, and there's lots of analysis done within that space. So if you want to do any Google around that, or there's some good YouTube videos about it. People have done PhDs on it, but basically, as a driver, you're looking out for other 4-wheel vehicles and not anything on 2, because it's just not within the envelope. So definitely a concern for riders there, particularly if they are very close to the curb and channel, or where the outer ring is of the roundabout, because they can be hidden. And finally, rider C, there's a few areas where this could be an issue. So if they were back in time just in a moment, you can clearly identify that vehicles exiting could have a conflict point with that rider. But also it comes back to that vehicle, the yellow vehicle, decision that they may make, where if they see the vehicle adjacent them going, they may go out as just automatically. So hypothetically, the purple vehicle stops at the last second because they see rider C and they manage to brake in time. Rider C continues going, but the yellow vehicle has just made the decision, well, I've seen the purple vehicle go, so I'm going to go as well. And that's where you get that collision. So all of them are pretty valid answers and all of them have their risks. And this is a diagram just to highlight that basically every situation of the roundabout, there are pretty significant concerns if you're a rider. Now, a few years ago, 10 years ago actually now, Austroads had a bit of a look at the data for crashes that have occurred between a vehicle and a cyclist within roundabouts. And as part of this analysis, they categorize, well, what are the different crash types or the movements occurring for that collision to have occurred. So I'll just go around the roundabout, and chat through what are the most common crash types that we're seeing. So the red arrow within this diagram, which has got a full line, that represents the vehicle. And then the dotted light green arrow, that is the bike rider. So 68%, which is the majority, is entering motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists. So that's riders that are already within the roundabout and motor vehicles failing to yield to them. So it's generally that idea of looking but failing to see. So not giving way to riders who are already within the roundabout was seen as the largest source of trauma for the crash types that were categorized. Cyclists crossing as pedestrians was about 8%. And where we tend to see this trauma as well is on the exit leg. So you can see it by the arrow there. When vehicles are exiting, they tend to have their foot on the accelerator, so they're picking up speed. And it's just also not a common area to expect to have to yield and give way to other users there. So particularly if you've got riders coming from the other direction, if they're crossing in this direction, you can also have issues of like sightline obstructions. There could be vegetation and things that's been installed here. And you may not have that ability to be able to see those exiting vehicles as you go to attempt to cross that leg. So it's about 8% that we're seeing there. This one always catches me by surprise, which is exiting motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists, which is 9%. And the reason I say I'm surprised, because anecdotally, if I were to say what is, the most stressful part of the roundabout, it's this collision. It's if you were riding in a roundabout and let's say you were turning right, I'll just get rid of all these arrows so far. You were going riding and turning right like that. Whenever I'm in that position, particularly multi-lane, what I'm most nervous about is that vehicle that's exiting and whether they will recognize me or not as not going through there, but in fact turning right across the lane. So super, super stressful. But interestingly, the statistics don't necessarily say that that's the highest level of trauma that's occurring. It's around the 9%, and instead the entering motor vehicles is the highest. So it's also good to have that data to, I guess, limit your bias and your own, anecdotal evidence, and instead focus on, well, what does history show us? So some good lessons to be learned there. The final 10%, sideswipe within the roundabout. It's basically just vehicles straying into the bicycle lane or failing to maintain their traffic lane, and then having that clipping collision with a rider. And then a further 5%, which was unidentified because perhaps the collision wasn't quite clear within the police report. So that is how most of our roundabouts operate. And basically, any which way you look at it, there's going to be risks at the entry legs, the exit legs, the circulating area. So protected roundabouts try and simplify all of that and make it a lot safer for riders. Now, this is an example of grade separation. It's not an example of a protected roundabout. It is in the Netherlands, of course. It's called the Hovenring. And it's just a reminder that if you're actually doing any, high-speed interactions, it's very difficult to manage conflicts with vehicles, because you're just not going to be able to get, the impact speeds low enough for those to be survivable. And it's also pretty unexpected for vehicles in those high-speed environments to be able to yield to any riders. So yeah, anyway, in the Netherlands, they decided, well, we're not going to bother putting riders down there on the carriageway level. We're just going to grade separate. You could also go the other way and tunnel. But yeah, basically, it's not a good idea to just assume that everything can work at grade and it'll be all hunky-dory. Instead, you can look at this as an idea. Alrighty. Oh, that's just another photo of it. So just to confirm, you've got all your traffic, vehicle traffic on the carriageway level there, and then all your riders and pedestrians, they get to use this elevated structure, so they don't have to deal with any of that traffic. All right, we'll have a look at our protected roundabouts now. And once again, the resource that we are using is going to be from an American source. So I've flipped everything over, and there's a few terminology issues that I'm just going to have to translate, because it's just not how we would use certain words or different jargon, but the principles are still very much the same and absolutely transferable. So don't get too concerned about things like that. So we've got some key features that we need to look out for as part of designing a protected roundabout. And as I alluded to at the start, priority is we're not going to bring riders into the circulating area. Instead, we're going to provide them an offset away from that space so that they don't have to deal with the conflicts close to that circulating area. So the circulating area there and the conflict point has been offset from there. Okay, so that's really the most critical feature. And figure number 1 is just showing that, yep, we've got a bicycle crossing that's clearly offset from that circulating area. We've got some yield lines, so that's number 2. Those are the shark's teeth, which is used in North America. It's also used in parts of Europe. We wouldn't use that line marking. We would use give way line marking and also have a give way sign. But that clearly articulates that motorists, you need to slow down and give way as you're exiting or entering this roundabout to pedestrians and to riders. So it's giving that priority to vulnerable road users. Number 3 is I'm going to cross off because it doesn't make sense, which is saying a bicycle stop line. You don't want to create this confusion around who gives way to who. So if you put a stop line for cyclists and also a give way to vehicles, the priority is very ambiguous. Who should yield to who? Instead, just make it clear. Give way is provided for the motorists, so vulnerable road users have that priority. Number 4, 5-foot curb radius. Don't worry about that either. Number 5 is referred to as a channelizing island. Now, the purpose of that feature is once again just to separate your pedestrian traffic from your riding traffic. So in other words, pedestrians cross there, people on bikes, they cross adjacent. So we're not sharing that area. There's these two distinct locations. Exact same premise as what we spoke about with the protected intersections. The channelizing island can help facilitate that. I wouldn't think it's a required feature. You can also run into the issue that if you're providing those channelizing islands, you know, it creates another tripping hazard, which is not great. So the main takeaway there is you just want to provide those two separate areas for crossing. And then, of course, just some signage. We would use giveaway signage and perhaps supplementary panels just to confirm that you're giving way to peds and riders. Yeah, so that's the general premise of what we're looking at for protected roundabouts. And find it's always much easier to talk to actual examples. So we'll have a look at the Netherlands here. This is in Assen. And this is an example of a protected roundabout where you've got quite a large footprint. So you can see that this is not an urban area. There happens to be quite a lot of space to play with. And you're able to achieve quite a large offset. So by offset, I just mean where the riders are crossing and where the edge of the circulating area is. I'm just going to keep referring to that as the offset. It's pretty big there. You probably won't be able to get that space requirements in a lot of the sites that you'd be looking at, just because in built-up areas, we don't have this much land available. So just to confirm how this kind of works, and the reason that we're promoting this is if you're a bike rider and you're riding, you want it to turn right as an example, like this. The first thing is you've got priority across all of those legs. So it's a much more attractive ride and convenient for you because you don't have to slow down and stop and give way and then slow down, stop and give way. It's, yeah, just a more convenient and easier to ride type of journey. The other thing, and perhaps the most critical, is the sight lines, again, are much better in instances where you've got that offset provided. So a vehicle exiting the roundabout, they are, in this instance, more or less crossing over the bicycle facility perpendicular. And we've spoken to this a few times now, where we do want to make that conflict angle as close to perpendicular as possible because we know that that maximizes sight lines. So you've got riders going in front of the windscreen as opposed to on the left near side or the passenger door side. So it's a lot easier to be able to make that eye contact and yield or know that there's traffic there that you need to give way to. Here's what it looks like out on the grounds. Ainsley, you got a question?
Yes, Max. We have just received a question. If you have any comments about some of the signage for cars to give way to the cyclists. So I know at some of these locations there might be some pedestrian crossing signage. Is there any for cyclists specifically though?
Good question. We'll give a prize out there. And the answer is it's very jurisdiction specific. So depending on which part of the country you're calling in from, you may do things a little bit differently. Within Victoria here, the way that we would do it is we'd have a give way sign. So that's give way. And then underneath it, a supplementary panel, which has just got a symbolic person and a symbolic bicycle That's pretty bad drawing, but you get the idea. So that's kind of how we manage it in Victoria. Other jurisdictions don't have those panels and they do slightly different things. But yeah, probably get in touch with your state road authority for more info of how that could be adequately signed.
Perfect. Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Ainsley. Loretta, another question.
While I've got you, thank you.
Please.
I think referring to the previous slide, just a bit of curiosity, just there on the left-hand side, there's no zebra markings on the bottom sort of left crossing. Any reason for that?
You know, I've looked at this site dozens of times and never noticed that. That is very good eyesight and definitely a prize going out there. And I had no idea why that would be the case. That's very unusual. Actually, I've got, oh no. No, I don't know. I don't know why. Really strange. You would certainly expect that all of those legs would have a consistent treatment applied, but there's no zebra there. Yep. I think that's actually is that the photo? No, that isn't the photo. That's a different leg.
Just got another comment that's come through the chat, which I'll read through. That offset between exit and crossing point is key in these designs so that existing vehicles that have to give way, existing the roundabout aren't left prone exposed within the circulating road. There has to be a sign, give way to cyclists, sign in New South Wales, as otherwise it isn't supported by the road rules.
Yep. Okay. Yep. No, that's a fair point. Yeah. So just ensuring that you've got this offset there so you're able to be able to adequately sight any crossing users. And also they've got a bit of space there. So if vehicles are exiting, they're not going to be blocking the carriageway there. I think that was the main takeaways there. I did want to show you some other examples of some protected roundabouts because I appreciate not all of our sites will have that land availability. And well, what can we do in our more built up areas? And in this example, we are in a more constrained environment. You can see that there's the building envelopes at each quadrant there. And that would limit the ability to be able to provide a great offset. So the offset that I talked about before was the edge of the circulating area to where the cyclists are crossing. And in this example, the offset is incredibly small. It's minimal. You can see that there is some channelizing islands or separators being used, some curb, just to help delineate where that separation exists, but it is much, much closer to the circulating area. This is another example in the Netherlands. This is just outside Rotterdam. And to me, I wanted to kind of show you the two extremes of the spectrum, where you've got lots of space, provide that offset, but where you don't have that space to work with, you may be playing more with a protected roundabout that looks like this. One of the benefits associated with this kind of approach is it's actually easier for riders to travel within because they've got less space to have to ride around. So doing a right turn, for instance, it's quicker for them. They're not taken off on a detouring path, something like that instead. So it can be more attractive for that type of reason. However, the limitation that we need to be aware of with this is because we're not achieving that offset, when we have vehicles that are exiting, they don't really have those sight lines that we like to see. So it's actually perfectly illustrated in this little aerial image, whereby you can see that that white vehicle is exiting the roundabout. And you can also see that there is a rider within that outer ring. So as they're traveling around here, you can appreciate that if you were driving in that white vehicle, it's practically impossible for you actually to be able to see that rider that is going to be on your near side, right behind you, likely not in your wing mirrors and likely not in your rear view mirror. So they're effectively hidden, which is not a great design outcome. Just to illustrate that point, here's what this roundabout looks like out on the ground. And I'm just going to drag in a little Porsche 911 so we can really appreciate what this perspective may feel like. But if this Porsche was leaving the roundabout there and you were on your bicycle there and going around, your ability to be able to make eye contact and for the Porsche driver to actually yield to you is pretty restricted, which is a concern. So the closer that you bring that offset to the circulating area, the smaller that you make it, the more that you are going to impact on those sidelines. So it's something that you need to be wary of. The other consideration for the other side of the spectrum that I wanted to touch on, and I might go back to the previous slide just to confirm it, is how far is too far away for that offset. So let's just make it a bit more dramatic and say that the offset look like something like this. Now, yes, we're getting that conflict angle perpendicular, so that's a big tick. That's what we want to kind of see when we're going for these designs. But there's two pretty, understandable risks associated with that. Is the more that you detour riders like that, the less likely they are to use that type of facility because it's too far out of their way. Like they're going, 50 meters that way just to head straight. It's just not going to be an attractive thing for them to be doing. But the other thing is, the further that you put the conflict point away, as the vehicle is exiting, they're just picking up more and more speed. They're getting faster and faster and faster, which is once again making them less likely to actually slow and yield, particularly if it's not a raised crossing point. So you don't want to provide too large an offset either for that reason. So that there is this middle ground that you'd like to work in. And generally what we kind of recommend as a good rule of thumb is to provide enough room for one vehicle to prop and store within this space before getting to that conflict point, which is about the 6 meter mark, something like that. So if you've got 6 meters in between the edge of your circulating area where that conflict point is, you've got enough for one car to prop and give way without blocking the circulating area as well. That's another congestion benefit. You're still achieving those sight lines and you're minimizing that detour distance. So that's generally what's kind of accepted as what you should be aiming for. Okie dokie. I wanted to provide another example. This one's in Cambridge, sorry. Fenton Road in Cambridge in the UK. And I like that they've got this, outer ring for the riders, which is similar to our second example, because just having that ring concept, like one smooth radius, it's a lot more comfortable to ride in. It just feels a bit better than having to do lots of little turns and things like that. But what they've also managed to achieve here is what I was reflecting on, of providing basically a 6 meter wide offset. So one vehicle has got the space to be able to stop and yield, give way to any riders or pedestrians crossing there without blocking the circulating area. And this is the example of what it looks like out on the ground. And you can see that, this motorist here has got a pretty good sight triangle to be able to see any crossing users there. They're not forced to look right around over their shoulder. It's more or less right in front of them, those crossing users, so much more likely to yield. I'm going to play this little video of a protected roundabout in action. And as this is playing, just have a look at how the traffic is being managed, how they're interacting. We've got a bus that's approaching as well. All of this cycling traffic occurring. And I just want to, I suppose, sell the point that these are not hypothetical illustrations or anything like that. Protected roundabouts are installed across the world, and we do know that they work. They can work with heavy vehicles. They can work in bi-directional facilities. If you look at the right-hand side of this roundabout, you can see that that's bi-directional. The top left is just one way. So they can work in a variety of instances, and just wanted to sell the message that it might be a little bit confusing and you might need to get some initial engagement with the community and stakeholders, but just rest assured that the traffic can flow and things will continue if you're going down this as an option for your design projects. I'll pause there and check in if we've got any questions from Loretta Ainsley.
We don't have any questions at the moment, Max. I think everyone's just busy admiring that roundabout.
It's a beauty, huh?
Oh, it looks absolutely perfect. It would be good to see a few more around our areas.
That's right. All right, I'll carry on then, and we can get stuck into Melbourne's protected roundabout. So we've got this image of what things look like prior to the installation of the protected roundabout. And it was basically bicycle lanes in the periphery of the roundabout, something that I'm not fond of at all. You don't really want your riders riding on the outskirts because it's just even harder for entering motorists to be able to see them. They're not in a prime position. But that was what was installed previously. I am not going to go into the detail of this project because in the Module 4 360-degree video, I speak more around the project history and the specifics. So if you want to know those types of details, you just have to wait until you watch the video. But this is what the protected roundabout looks like today after the installation. And I might just zoom in on it so you can get a better look at it. And I'll throw a question out to the group. So get ready to jot down some answers. And the question that I have for this specific site, but for others as well, I've talked a lot about the advantages associated with the protected roundabouts. Can you think of any disadvantages for bike riders with the installation of protected roundabouts? So I'm looking for disadvantages for bicycle riders with protected roundabouts. Pop your ideas into the chat. I'll give you 35 seconds to have a crack at that. If anyone's ridden this facility as well and wants to share their own thoughts, by all means, you're welcome to provide that anecdotal experience. All right, there's some very wonderful insights coming through. So thanks for sharing in the chat. Yes, it is a good point that kind of going up and down between carriageway level and then up onto the footpath level. And then if you're getting back onto the carriageway level, depending on how that transition is managed, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. I've certainly had that feedback from other riders that have used this facility that they just don't like the ramp transitions there. Yeah, it's not a great outcome. So that's definitely well spotted. Also, shout out to those that have acknowledged the quirky shape that's going on in Melbourne. We've got this octagon shape. So we don't have one nice ring around, which I spoke about before. Like riders tend to prefer just a smooth radius curve to cycle through. These kind of acute, sharp angles are a little bit more uncomfortable, particularly if you're riding an e-bike or you're riding a cargo bike or anything like that. It's not really a convenient way to travel. But the answer that I can see has popped up quite a few times, and one that I did want to award a prize to, was it is a longer journey time for riders. So I'll take the example of turning right where this issue is exacerbated. If you were a conventional roundabout or previously, what you may be doing to turn right is accessing the circulating area, performing that type of movement. Now instead, using the protected roundabout, you'd be doing something like this. Of course, on an aerial, it looks negligible, and you know, why are we complaining about that? But when you're actually riding, just like if you're a pedestrian walking to the shop, you know, you just want to get there as quickly as possible. And if things are in your way or you have to do a detour, it can become frustrating. So Loretta, we'll give our prize for the third person that mentioned the longer distance or longer travel time for that. I think that's a...
Will do. I was going to say there's quite a few that answered that one. So the third person, all good. Thanks, Matt.
Number 3, numero 3. But, you know, some people think that if we don't have 100% compliance with all riders in the protected roundabout, then there's been a failure within the project. I'm not quite so critical. We actually did an evaluation of the treatment itself, and part of that evaluation included how many riders are actually using the protected roundabout feature. So our analysis concluded during our site observations that for riders that were going through, 91% were using, you know, the protected roundabout feature. And for riders that were turning right, 77% were using the circulating area, just like this fellow here, because it is more convenient, it's quicker. So 77%. Now, as I said, some may have expected that, you know, 100% compliance, but I don't think that's a realistic goal to achieve. Instead, some of the, you know, key targets of this project was to see higher usage of this as a route and increased safety outcomes, perception of safety, as well as actual trauma statistics and things like that, which are much more important metrics, and not trying to get 100% using, you know, the protected facility. So if you were in an environment where you were like, well, I really don't want to encourage the circulating area at all as an option, I've just included these photos here to show you what it looks like as you approach the protected roundabout. And as you can see, a bit of a stencil with an arrow and some text that says use bike lane at roundabout by no means really motivates me or anyone else to, you know, take that as an option. It's very, very easy to ignore that and take the route that's most convenient. As I said, if it was imperative to avoid that altogether, you could install physical barriers. In other words, increasing the separation all the way up until the protected roundabout facility till you've got that off-road connection, because then it's basically more inconvenient for you to actually access the circulating area. So you can just make it much less attractive or less easy, or harder, maybe another word, to actually access the circulating area. So that's something else to consider. I am going to hit the pause button there and give everyone a 3-minute break to have a little stretch, get a drink, and I'll see you in 3 minutes. Final little session of the module, and then we can get stuck into the assignment, which is exciting. We'll move to our next topic though, which is multi-lane roundabouts. And I might just move the banner a little bit so you can have a better look at this, what's going on here. Basically, multi-lane roundabouts exacerbate those issues that we've spoken about and also introduce new ones. So one thing that I'm going to focus on for this is, I suppose, the worst case scenario and where the issues are probably most prevalent, which is managing right turns in multi-lane roundabouts. So in this scenario here, just to give you some context, we've got an 80km/h road, and we can see that we do have some type of off-road bicycle facility that's provided. But as you get closer and closer to the give way line there, there's a few things that happen. The first thing is it transitions down to carriageway level, and it also gets a bit smaller. Can you see how the width of that facility is not maintained? It's actually tapering down. The reason that may have occurred is because of some heavy vehicle swept path analysis and acknowledging that the line marking would represent where that heavy vehicle's rear axles would be. But that has come at the cost of not maintaining the width for the bicycle facility. So that's just the first pet peeve of mine. But if we're considering a rider that was turning right at this environment, what they may be doing is cycling along here and then entering this space here, pausing, turning right, picking a gap within the traffic, heading over there, pausing, picking a gap in traffic, and then continuing their journey. I should clarify, there's no curb ramps or anything in this example that would actually facilitate that movement, but that is an option that could happen for right turn cyclists. The other thing that does occur, and by no means are we encouraging this or endorsing this, but what does occur is turning right from the left lane. So rider doing something like this. Probably not too difficult to understand why that would be something that we would not recommend, because you've got these two very perilous conflict points, and as a rider was, performing that right turn or trying to make that decision, basically at this point here, they'd need to make the call whether or not there's that gap in traffic, and for you to turn over your shoulder and quickly identify if there's any through traffic, it's a very, very difficult thing to be doing. But that kind of thing does happen because that first option is not very attractive to a lot of riders. Now, the other way a rider may actually turn right in an environment like this would be just to ignore the off-road facility altogether and just try early on in the approach to get into the right turn traffic lane and do this type of movement. There's really no good way in any of those scenarios to manage that, particularly when none of that has actually been formalized. It's just to get there how you want to get there kind of approach. So multi-lane roundabouts, pretty significant risks for riders, and one where grade separation should genuinely be looked at, of just being like, you know what, it's very, very challenging to bring riders through here safely. So let's try and elevate them or bring them underground so we don't have to interact with vehicles in this space. Now, I'll show you some other examples of what could be arranged, but that could be a feasible solution. This is what this site looks like out on the ground. Hopefully you can see a little bit clearer of that bicycle lane narrowing, which is just very annoying. You also may have noticed that there was a bit of a hold line in there's a hold line there. I just wanted to clarify that's got nothing to do with the cycling infrastructure. That's just got to do with this railway level crossing. Those are the signals there. So when those boom gates go down, it's just like a red left turn arrow. So you don't just drive straight into the boom gates. Nothing to do with making cyclist journey safety. So what else could we do in this environment? Well, I've got another example. This one is, as you can tell by the configuration, it's a very, very similar layout. This is in Canberra, though, which is like the roundabout capital of Australia. And they thought of it a little bit more sensibly of how to manage cycling journeys through this location. And let's just take you on a journey. We'll focus on the right-hand side. We start on an on-road facility, but as we get closer to the roundabout, we are being transitioned off-road. So we've got a curb and channel there to protect us. And instead of entering the circulating area, we're being dragged away from that. So similar idea to the protected roundabouts of offsetting where the conflict point is being applied here. The difference here is the priority is still the motorists, because they're going at much higher speeds and it's pretty unreasonable or difficult for you to be able to design it in a way where pedestrians and cyclist connectivity and their priority is going to be understood and assumed and clear. So in these instances where you do have high traffic volumes, high speeds, it's pretty unlikely you're going to be able to do an at-grade solution that can maintain priority for bike riders. And that can be okay, as long as it's clear for all users there. So riders need to be clear that, okay, I'm entering this roundabout and I know that I don't have priority here. I need to slow down. There's a little U-rail or like a hold rail for riders at the crossing location as well. So for those bike riders that use cleats or clip-ons, they don't have to worry about, being unsteady. They can just grab a hold of this pole, and then once they've got the gap in traffic, they can cross over there. Similar story if they were going right, grab the hold rail. When there's a gap, cross over, complete your journey. Is that more circuitous? Yes. Is it more annoying because you've got to stop start? Yes. Absolutely, those things are true. But it's just not feasible to be able to suggest at-grade solutions here and award that priority for peds and cyclists, because motorists will just want to get through there and they'll be traveling at speed, and it's incredibly hard for them to slow down. If there's just a give way sign, they're just going to ignore that. So just want to give you a bit of perspective. This is what the environment looks like out there in Canberra. And there is some signage and stuff to say that, you should be using this transition facility. Importantly, though, what I do like to acknowledge is you're not really being forced to take that as an option. So we do know that there's plenty of riders that would be like, nah, I'm just going to take the through lane, or I'm going to get over to the right turn traffic lane. And that still is an option. It's not the safest option by any means, but it's not forcing all riders to take that as the path, because a lot of commuter riders or training riders just have absolutely no desire to have to slow down and give way to traffic and hold the rail and stuff like that. It's just not feasible for them as well. So I actually don't mind having both of those options available, acknowledging that there are still safety risks with this as an option. For anyone that's got Austroads guides to road design printed out in your office or your desk at home or whatever it is, make sure that if you're using a version that says 2011, that you put a big red cross through this diagram, because that has been superseded. So this is no longer included within the Austroads guide. And what this is saying that we're okay to put or bicycle lanes on the periphery of multi-lane roundabouts. No, where we just don't accept that that is a feasible solution at all. It cannot be managed safely. So this one gets a big cross. Make sure if you've got this one printed out or you've seen this one before, just remember that that is no longer being recommended for practice. Another jazzy concept that I like to share at this stage is how we can tie our movement and place classifications to our treatment ideas. For those that haven't done any movement and place training or you're not familiar with that term, I'll do my best to explain it in the next 30 seconds or so, but it's basically this idea of acknowledging that as a transport network, we've got these two main functions. One is the movement of goods and people. That's a clear function of the transport network. But another function is a place function. And by place, I just mean somewhere where people like to hang out or they like to meet, they like to congregate, they like to go. So if you consider, you know, a strip shopping center, that could have a high movement function, as in it's important to get traffic through there, but it could also have a high place function where the community like to spend time. The reason I'm bringing that up is because that lens of thinking of different movement functions can then help decision makers identify what could be appropriate treatments to install on their network. So just as an example, this is just a concept, but I will just speak through my own assumptions of this concept design, where this east-west leg, I can see it's a divided carriageway. So I know that they're generally only used for high traffic routes. So I'm going to assume it's got a high movement function. And the north-south legs, they look like just a connection into a residential community or something like that. It's just single lane each way, run-of-the-mill type of configuration. So probably not as significant, not as much movement function through there. And the reason that I'm mentioning that is because our treatments may differ depending on that movement function. So where we've got riders crossing over the high movement corridor, the design is noting, let's install grab handles for cyclists at the crossing points. And in other words, let's award the priority to general traffic because that's their movement corridor. It's really important to keep that flow of traffic. Conversely, where we have a bit more influence to be able to impact on movement function would be our north-south legs. And instead, our north-south legs feature raised crossing points. So we're going to really slow down vehicles there. And we're also going to force them to yield to crossing riders and pedestrians. The other reason I kind of like using this one as an example is, once again, if you're thinking in that movement and place framework, and if you're saying that this is an east-west leg that has a high movement function, and it's important to maintain that movement, then yes, award that priority to east-west general traffic, but also award that priority to east-west cycling traffic. So both of them have got the priority for where that high movement function has been identified. So it kind of makes sense from that aspect as well. Anywho, that's just a concept I thought was worth sharing. I wanted to have a look now at local roundabouts and how we can manage our cycling journeys safely here in these environments. And Loretta looks like she's burning for a question.
Yeah, just before you head on, I guess, I thought I'll get in there. Would you need a larger offset in this case to ensure vehicles turning onto the minor north-south legs don't block east-west traffic when giving way to riders?
It's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah. So this is only concept level. I don't believe it's gone the functional or any swept path checks. You may need to create a larger offset there just to ensure you're not going to be blocking the circulating area, increasing the risk of rear end crashes and things like that. But yeah, just meant to be taken as a face level, and I think all of that would come out in the more detailed design. But very good point. We'll give a prize out there. So let's have a look at this roundabout now. This is a local roundabout, and it's the last time we'll get to play this little game, which is what's wrong with this photo. And it's our final confused bike rider here. And the question, of course, for the group is what you think is wrong with this photo. So chuck it in the chat. I'll give you 30 seconds to have a flick through that one. Also, if you know where this photo was taken, you'll get a prize. Looks like most roundabouts. Let's give a prize out to Sarah. I certainly agree with that. The lighting column looks wonky. The power pole here, yeah, it does look wonky. I've never noticed that. Okay, I'm seeing another good consensus coming through. Great to see that the risk of dooring has been picked up on this side. That's absolutely spot on. That is something wrong with this photo, something to be concerned about. But yeah, I think the general consensus is how we are maintaining cycling connectivity leading up to this roundabout. And basically just ending the cycling facility is not a reasonable way to do it. You've got to be a bit more considerate of how we manage this and make sure that people riding have got a clear path to be able to head through the roundabout and feel like they're not in imposition or not just, you know, being a second-class citizen, so to speak. So some options here would be, you know, can we bring our riders onto the adjacent footpath or shared path? Loretta, I didn't see any answers for the location for this one. Did you see any?
No, I didn't.
No one
Nothing
knows?
came through.
That's all right.
Anyone know where this is?
It's
Give you 10 seconds before Max tells us. Anyone?
10 seconds. You're very kind, Loretta. It's not Victoria. It's not Brisbane. It's not New South Wales. It's not Adelaide.
Oh.
It is in Tasmania.
All right, so we have a winner. Thank you.
Give the prize out there to Michael. It's in Launceston, beautiful Launceston. It's Elfin Road, Brisbane Street, Lawrence Street. It's their peanut-shaped roundabout near the Botanic Gardens thing there. Anywho, but yeah, got to have a think about, can we bring them off-road, create some kind of shared path facility, or if we're talking local roads, local streets, low speeds, we may be able to shift them into the carriageway itself. And the way that that is once again managed is through the use of Sharrow. So if you're not proposing to provide a transition facility or a protected roundabout or somewhere where riders can get away from the circulating area, then your next best option is just let them ride smack bang in the middle of the traffic lane, as well as the circulating area. So don't try to force them into the periphery, because all of those sightline issues are exacerbated. Once again, if you're in a vehicle giving way at the hold line, you're focused on other vehicles within the circulating area, and your eyes are really focused on the middle of the circulating area. Any vehicle that's positioning themselves, you know, right on the periphery is just not going to be your prime focus. So we don't want to encourage that. Instead, we want riders to take that prime position. But once again, only appropriate where this is a local environment. So we're talking low traffic speeds and low volumes. So a couple thousand vehicles a day, the default speed would likely apply. Yeah, but anything higher than that is just not really going to be suitable for Sharrows. Another thing that we really like to see is if you are recommending this type of treatment is supplementing it with local area traffic management treatments. So things like speed cushions or speed humps, vertical deflection in particular, really, really good idea because that is physically going to slow down motorists. So in this example, you can see the speed cushion has been installed just prior to where the give way hold line is approaching the roundabout. We actually think it's a better solution to install this facility prior to the conflict point. So in other words, you'd have vehicles slowing down and then riders get the Sharrows, they claim the traffic lane. So you've got the conflict point at reduced speeds. So once again, that speed that we're kind of looking for is around 30 kilometers per hour. Speed cushions are able to do that. Like that, they can slow vehicles down to that. So really, really good idea is if you are proposing Sharrows within your roundabouts, implementing devices like that prior to where that conflict point is. And then you would also implement them, the Sharrows, that is, within the roundabout itself. It's not in this example, but providing them within the roundabout just to once again help riders recognize where they should position themselves and give them confidence that, yes, you're okay to ride right in the middle of this traffic lane because we think that's the safest spot in this example. Got another example here of Sharrows being used approaching a roundabout here. Another example of a local area traffic management treatment, vertical deflection being used. Once again, we would, however, recommend bringing it forward prior to where the conflict point is, just so that we're managing vehicle speeds. Now, the next part of this session is just to go through some education campaigns, some things that we've noted over several years, because we recognize that engineering is one aspect that can be used to really advocate for improved safety for cyclists. However, we also need to acknowledge that we're working with humans, and so the behavioral element also plays a factor. And you might have the greatest facility in place, but does everyone know how to access it? Does everyone know that riders are vulnerable on-road situations and things like that? There's a lot to be said about communicating that messaging as well. So we just wanted to share some campaigns that have been installed in various jurisdictions that do a good job of that. And whilst I'm going through this education campaign component, I'll get Loretta to launch our final poll for the session. And the poll is going to be just a recap of the first question that we asked, which is how you would rate your own cycling skills. So same question that we had. How would you rate your level of cycling infrastructure knowledge? The answer is very knowledgeable, aware but don't know much, or not aware. Go through that in your own time and I'll just chat through these. So the lookout for cyclists or the bike month is in Canada. It's in California. And basically every June, they throw up all these posters, all the adverts, bus shelters and online and things like that. And it's this constant reminder to the community that riders are out there on the network. They're incredibly vulnerable. And, you know, we need to acknowledge that they're part of this network and they're not to be seen as, you know, something that's extra or supplementary, and we need to look out for them. So it's just this annual event almost where it's being constantly reinforced that cyclists are out there and they're vulnerable. So I think that repetition is really important. When you mentioned the poll there. The Red Cup project, this happened a few years ago. It was kind of exploding on Twitter. And it was this idea of bicycle users across the world putting red cups on their bicycle lane, at the edge of their bicycle lane. You can see that they've been installed there. And then a few hours later, having a photo at the same location, and invariably you'd see them get crushed because how regularly motorists are using the bicycle lane, they're tracking into it, not necessarily deliberately, but doing sweeping, turning movements, or just not staying in their traffic lane. And this was a real, community-led kind of activism space where it's just saying, this painted line is not good enough to protect me. And it still absolutely holds true today, where we shouldn't consider just putting down some line marking is separation, because it is absolutely not. And there still is the very possibility of vehicles entering that space and having collisions with vulnerable road users. So some people also put some dramatic things in there, like tomatoes and apples and things like that, just to add to theatrics. But that was a little Twitter campaign that kind of blew up when trending. This one I just love to share. It's pretty exciting, where this bloke in New York who got fed up of asking council to install some protected bicycle lanes, just decided to go to the local Bunnings warehouse or whatever they've got over there, and bought some plumbing, what they call plungers, bought some plungers, picked up a 50 or so and got some epoxy glue and just built their own separated, protected bicycle lane. How good is that? You've got to admire the absolute dedication to do that. Unfortunately, the council were not as impressed. They did rip it out. Didn't stack up, not meeting code conditions, apparently. And unfortunately also, as far as I'm aware, this still remains as a bicycle facility on road, only line marking, not separated. So didn't quite achieve the goal there, but yeah, certainly like that energy. Not that I condone any vandalism or anything like that. The final one that I'm not going to share now, but you're welcome to watch in your own time, is this advert out of Scotland that was aired several years ago now, which is See Cyclist Think Horse. Unfortunately, it was a short-lived campaign because many Scots were writing in to express their dissatisfaction for two reasons. One of them, that this bicycle rider was not wearing a helmet. That is not a legal requirement within the UK, so it's completely legal to do what she is doing, but people are still upset that it conveyed that image. People were also very upset, this particular ad, that she wasn't riding closer to the curb and channel, that nice, bluestone cobbled feeling. Like she should be going closer to there. So it didn't last too long as an ad, but I think it's still, it's useful to use humor, which is what this ad is, to help with any of your campaigns, because people tend to resonate quite well with humor. They tend to remember it, and it tends to leave a more lasting impact. So you can watch that over lunch. I'll put that on your to-do list. It's a bit of fun. We've got one more video for you to watch, and it will be examples of riding through protected roundabout as well as a conventional roundabout. In this example too, in particular, I am doing a right turn. And what I'd recommend you do is just flick the camera right around, because you can see that there's a vehicle that wants to go through. And that was that kind of really nervous movement that I spoke about before, where it feels like you're not 100% sure whether that motorist knows that you're turning right, even though you could be signaling or indicating. It can get very stressful. So really, really good example of that specific conflict and worth watching. And also it's a little bit of a longer video because we've got a third example as well of where you may not have a protected roundabout on all of the legs. Maybe it's just a certain couple of legs. So make sure you hang around for that. Now, I've left extra time for today for two reasons. The first being, I want to make sure everyone understands the assignment. They fully comprehend what is required next. And also, final opportunity to get this live feedback or answer any of your questions about any of the cycling stuff. So use this time now to jot down any questions you may have. Ainsley.
Yeah, just quickly before we do jump into the assignment, Max, we had a question in the Q&A, which I think will kind of wrap up the course nicely. Do you have any advice on the optimal intersection treatments for cyclists from a safety perspective? So, for example, protected roundabout versus protected intersection, or local compact roundabout with sharrows versus a traditional giveaway or stop intersection?
Great question. We'll give a prize out there. And if you're talking optimal, absolutely grade separation. There is absolutely nothing better than not interacting with that traffic and not worrying about that. And, you know, we've seen superstructures being built in other locations and we've got examples of them. We've got one in Melbourne that's currently under construction where, yeah, you just elevated it above the carriageway and you don't need to worry about those intersections at all. If you're talking more local environments, I'm actually okay with providing sharrows and having riders claim the traffic lane and things like that. Others have a different opinion on that and will be like, you just can't do that ever because lots of people don't know what that means and why there's bike riders in the middle of a traffic lane. And there is debate within industry as to whether that is actually something we should be recommending. And you know, that guidance could very well change over time. So just this point in time, I'm okay with the sharrows in local streets, low speeds and things like that. I think that's a really good outcome. When you are picking up in speed, definitely separated facilities and protected intersections. And the way that I see us actually achieving this across our networks is just being like, where are our cycling corridors? Like, what is the most important A to B connections for us? And let's just invest money there. Because if we're going to put it anywhere, we're going to do it there. And we're going to say, you know, maybe congestion is going to get a little bit worse for traffic, or maybe I'm going to have to eat up a traffic lane or buy a little bit of land just to make sure that I've got offsets for opening up sight lines and things like that. But I think strategically, if we think these are the most important corridors for our cycling network, let's get them up to scratch, and those can be, you know, the gold standard. And then from then we can build more, you know, connected types of networks across those corridors as well.
Perfect. And we did just have another one come in. So I know that we went through Melbourne's protected intersection in our previous module, but just a question, have you got any other examples of signalised intersections with 4 arms with separated cyclists on all 4 in an urban environment?
I feel like I do. If we can grab the details of that contact,
yeah,
I'll be able to send over some sites with that. There's a few in Queensland I can think of.
Perfect. We'll make note of that participant then, and we'll be in touch shortly.
Thank you, Ainsley. So, as mentioned, I did want to provide this time now. Keep the questions coming, but I'm going to spend a good portion just talking through this assignment because there's a few layers and I want to make sure it's all crystal clear for you. So the LMS, I really hope this screen looks familiar by now. We've got the 360-degree video, already spoke about that one. We've also got this letter to LGA's template. You're welcome to click on that and download it at the moment. I'll speak about it in a second. And we've got a module for assignment. So I'm going to click on the module for assignment and open that one up. Once again, a reminder, if you are from Transport for New South Wales, please email us your assignment directly to training@safesystemsolutions.com.au. because your firewall settings do not like our system, which is a bit frustrating, but just a heads up for our friends in Transport for New South Wales. The assignments is a Word document. I've already got the Word document open, so I'm not going to worry about downloading it. And it looks something like this. I'm going to take you through the steps. Step 1, we want you to select a site that has existing cycling facilities. What we mean by cycling facilities is give us an on-road bicycle lane, give us a protected bicycle lane, give us a shared park, anywhere where riders are currently able to ride and it's demarcated for that purpose. That's what we want you to pick. Step 2, review bike spots and check for any existing community concerns. So BikeSpot is a crowdsourced forum where members of the public were able to drop pins on areas where they thought this is some good cycling, infrastructure, or these are some areas that I don't feel comfortable in. And it was actually part of the Australian government and Amy Gillett Foundation, their grant application, to develop this crowdsourced idea. And there's thousands of these little pins all over Australia. So I'm just going to pick a random site, the site that we were actually looking at this morning. I can't remember where it was now. I think it's this one. Yeah, Grasmere Road here. So this was the site that I showed this morning with that weird left turn thing. And you can see someone's actually already dropped a pin here. So someone agrees that this is an unsafe spot. And you can click on the thing, the pin, I should say, and it'll tell you exactly what they see the issue is and their description and things like that. So there's actually 2 ways you could start this assignment off. You could either be like, I'm going to just pick a site that I know is, convenient for me to get to, or you could use BikeSpot, and be like, I'm going to look at this first and then base my site on it. Whatever one you want to do is fine. Most importantly is pick something that's convenient for you. You don't need to drive hours out of your way to get something that's really juicy or something like that. Just make sure it's near your house or near your work or near where you pick up the kids or something like that. Just don't go out of your way for this assignment. We want to make it convenient for you. And also, please don't pick something that's on a motorway or in a high-speed environment, because we don't want to put you in danger or anything like that. Pick a site that you can safely access. 2 really, really critical things, okay? We'll go back to the assignment. We want you to visit the site. So you actually have to go out there, take some photos, get that perspective. Now, you do not have to ride it. You may not have a bike. That's okay. But we do want you to go there on site. The reason is Google Street View is very good. It's got a, beautiful 360 lens in that moment in time. Your site may no longer look like that. Also, it's very, very difficult to pick up on some of those intricate issues like sightline issues and issues with the surface levels and things like that on Street View or doing a desktop assessment. So we love to get people out on site. Take a selfie while you're out on site. They'll give us a proof that you actually did it. And we just love to see selfies. So you got to go and visit the site. That's another reason why you pick something convenient. What we want you to do is answer 3 pretty straightforward questions. And the way that you answer them is completely up to you. So you can respond to them in a Word document. Job done. No problem there whatsoever. However, we have found that some people relish the opportunity to inject their own creativity. So we've had people, create TikToks. We've had people create little kids' books. We've had people write poems and songs, and it's wonderful for us as markers that we get this diversity of submissions. But it also gives you the platform to be like, I'm interested in this as an issue. And for me, the way that I think it's easiest to explain is to do an AutoCAD drawing or something like that. So Whatever forum works for you, we're happy to accept that as a submission. You're not going to be marked on your creativity. We just want to encourage it. So if you've got a wacky idea, you want to do some interpretive dance to provide answers, then we're all for it. So the questions that you need to answer though, so if you are doing the dance, I don't know how you're going to answer this, but you're probably more creative than me. The questions that you need to answer is, what infrastructure for cyclists currently exists? And what we will mark you on is, are you using the correct terminology? So flick back on the slides and make sure the language you're using is consistent with what we've taught in this course. Question number 2, what are the hazards for cyclists? So what are the risks associated with the existing facilities that are concerning to you? We don't need you to write every single risk that could occur or every type of crash that could occur. Pick the most salient, maybe 3 or so, and tell us exactly why they are hazards for riders. Finally, the last question you need to answer is, what could be installed to better improve safety for cyclists? Once again, you're going to be marked on your technical understanding of both the infrastructure that you're proposing and also the jargon that you're using is consistent. The reason that we're so, hammering home this idea of using the right jargon is it's really important when you're speaking with colleagues or peers within industry. If you say protected bicycle lane, you've both got in your head the same idea. So there's no gray area or confusion. You both know what you're talking about then. Those are questions you need to answer. Once you have completed that work in whichever forum that you like, you can upload the document onto the LMS. So similar to what you've done previously. And whoop, I'm done. Within the LMS, you just click on add submission, you drag your file, and then that uploads there. We have set a due date of next Friday. Now, yes, that is not a lot of time, but the reason we've set that is because we don't want you to spend a lot of time on this. This is not meant to be a thesis or anything like that. We want you to go out there, have a good understanding of what the risks are, write it up in whatever format suits you, and then submit it. If this is taking you days to complete, it's just too long of an activity and not something that we expect of our participants. So if you do feel like you're getting too much into the detail or spending too much time on it, reach out and we'll be able to guide you through that. Now, the second element of our assignment is optional, but we also wanted to include it. So optional step 6 is in pink here, which is fill in the letter to LGA's template, which is provided on the LMS, and send your assignment and letter to the relevant council. Please CC us in your correspondence. So we've had multiple participants in the past who have said, I've gone out on site and I've analyzed these hazards and I've said, these are the things that you can do to improve things. And I'm a bit frustrated that there's nowhere for me to then go on and hopefully deliver some change. So we've provided this as an option for those that want to start to lobby or advocate to our councils or state network that, there's some issues out there and we need to be aware of them. So we created a little template. Of course, you can shift things around to suit you. The pink highlighted stuff is what you'll need to fill in. So whichever authority that you're writing to, it could be the minister if you really wanted to. And it's saying, I've recently completed this technical training course. As part of the course, I inspected a section of, your jurisdiction. The site that I assessed was at this intersection, as an example. I wish to alert council or whoever to the following design features that increase the risk of cyclist crashes. And that's where you can just copy and paste from your assignment. I recommend councils look at the following treatments to improve the safety for cyclists. Once again, copy and paste from your assignment. If your site had any bike spot, comments from members of public, by all means, include that as a link. But if you don't have any information there, that's also fine. Just delete the paragraph and then sign off on it. So we've had multiple participants who have emailed their LGA to be like, I've gone out there and done this assessment and I want you to go do something about it, or at least be aware of it. So that's the reason we've included it. It is optional. Some people would probably be writing to themselves because they work for the LGA and they're also going to inspect a site within the LGA. By all means, you can address a letter to yourself. But yeah, it's just for those that really want to get involved in that space. So that's the assignment gone through, and I hope all of that was clear. There's a few other bits and pieces I wanted to get through on the LMS. The first one is under the resources tab. If you click on reference document and resources, you probably already had a bit of a look through here. This is where all the Austroads guides and various papers that I speak about in these sessions. But there is this document here called Cycling 360 Footage Examples. And you click on that one there. Open up. There we go. And this is basically just a resource for you to be able to have as a reference. So in 6 months' time, you can't quite remember what a protected bicycle lane is or whatever it is. We've provided this information like a kind of a cheat sheet, so you can just click on, whatever these topics are saying. So roundabouts, protected roundabouts, you can click on these examples and it'll take you to a 360-degree video of riding through that facility. We've also given you a little bit of a legend, bit of emoji legend, so you just remember what we would say is best practice and what we do not want to see more of. If you're going to watch any of them, maybe just watch the ones that say please no, because they're the ones that we definitely don't want to see more of. But just use as a little reference cheat sheet for you. So, in the future, you've just got that information at hand. So strongly recommend downloading that, chuck it on your local disk somewhere. The final thing I'll talk about is how to complete the course and receive your certificate. So the first thing you'll need to do is we do have a course feedback form, and it is a requirement to complete that. We take all of that feedback very, very seriously. We're continually developing and tweaking this course to ensure that we're providing, the best course that we can. So any suggestions for improvements are very, very welcome. We also provide people the opportunity to share their achievement online. So for those on LinkedIn, for example, we've got little badges, and if you click on here, it will just take us to kind of our website, which has got different badges that you can download. So the course that you're completing is Safe Cycling Infrastructure for Streets and Roads. If you click on that, you've got these little badges here, which you can then create a LinkedIn post or whatever social media platform that you're on, or just wanted to share with your colleagues. I've also given you some template words that you might like to use, just saying I've completed this course and why you did this training and things like that. Just for those interested in sharing their achievement. We've just done the hard work for you, so you don't need to worry about doing any of that yourself. Back to the finalizing this course now. So we've gone through the feedback and the badges. What you need to have completed is Module 1 quiz, achieve the 80%, Module 2 assignment, achieve the 80%, Module 3 quiz, Module 4 assignment, completed the feedback form. Once you've done all of that, this will actually be a hyperlink, and you can click on that and you'll get your certificate. And that is you having achieved completion of this course. If at any stage you're unsure of what you need to do next, or why you can't click on that, just reach out to the training team and they'll be happy to help. But any technical questions about your assignments or why you haven't received the grades that you were expecting, by all means, feel free to reach out to myself or Ainsley. We'll be happy to help you out. That was the conclusion of our Safe Cycling Infrastructure course, though. So very, very excited to have you all along and appreciate you all contributing with your feedback and your own anecdotal experience. Some of the benefits of hosting courses like this is getting to hear those perspectives and see about your own sites and how you're managing your projects, because we don't like to work in a myopic space. We like to focus more broadly on how all of the jurisdictions are managing their cycling networks. And it's really awesome to see that we've got this engaged group that they want to see better things out there for this network. And we really hope that we've given you that food for thought, that you feel empowered to go out there and start building those improved cycling infrastructure networks wherever you are. Big thank you, of course, to our wonderful moderators, Loretta, Marissa, and Ainsley, who's been doing a stellar job answering the Q&A in the background. I know she gets asked lots of doozy questions, and she's done an excellent job just swinging them out of the park, while I just got to present and keep everything flowing consistently. So any final questions that you had come through at the moment, Loretta or Ainsley?
There is one, just a quick one for the assignment. How long does the route need to be?
Great question. So there isn't a set length. You could just focus on an intersection as an example. So maybe if you were looking at an intersection, you'd say, well, what does the approach look like? What does the intersection treatment look like? And what does the exit look like? So that could look like 100 meters or so. Or you could have a look at a shared path, which could be an even shorter distance. But yeah, just want to make sure that you've got enough to talk about, but there's no real minimum that I would recommend there.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. And anything further from you, Ainsley, or all good?
No, I think that's all good. You've wrapped it up nicely, Max. So good work from your end as well.
Look forward to seeing those assignments.
Love to hear it. Yes, we do look forward to getting the next round of rap videos and, I don't know, comic books. It's very exciting for us. So by all means, encourage that creativity, but whatever works for you works for us. So don't get stressed if you can't think of anything too far out. We hope you all have a lovely weekend. If you're going for any cycling journeys, hope you're nice and safe. But yes, look forward to seeing what you build in the next few months, few years, and in your careers. So thank you very much for coming along, and yeah, take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.